we're going to be talking some about these ideas that we've been touching on in a couple of ways from some of the speakers about where this kind of human interaction, human-computer interaction is going, and how this can move us forward, both as individuals and as a group. But kind of building off some conversations that we've had, let me throw this question out to you. Where are we going wrong right now with the way we interact with computers? Oh dear. And there's a mic there, and there's a mic there, and you're all able to just fight over them.
I have a little opinion on this. I mean, I think the problem that we have right now with interface is that it's very much like you were saying in your talk about, it's based on this idea that the mind is separated from the body, and that we're basically taking the human mind and making it talk to the computer mind in a very linguistic sort of way. And that causes a lot of cognitive burden on the human. It worked early on when the way that what we expected from our computers was basically glorified calculations and word processing. But that's not what we expect anymore. We've completely dematerialized so many different tools and tasks into that box. And that model just doesn't work anymore. And I think I really responded to what you were saying about this XR space being more about an interface to this new method of computing, which is a distributed, dimensional way to use computers. And that the more that we look at how we as humans understand the world around us and the way that we interact with spaces and people and ourselves, that we can reduce so much of the cognitive burden that comes from computing, because we're no longer trying to adapt to it. Like now it can adapt to us, and when that happens, well, then I get my dream come true. Superhumans, which is really what we all want anyways.
I mean, we are superhumans at some point. I mean, as we said this morning, the brain is so powerful, and we have that for a reason. And if just look at where the humans are coming from, we always build tools to make our day better, to make our life easier. And to your point, like we're always building things, but now we are still serving, like building those computer.
Yeah, just like Jay was talking about, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, and in the future, that will shift.
Jay was talking about.
So we will just enjoy being served, to have then the freedom to do, like just imagine you're a billionaire, what we talked about this morning, and all those assistants serving you. So you can actually ask all kinds of questions to use your brain in a way different capacity to really push, again, human to a next level.
So maybe as a sort of meta reflection on this, I totally agree with you agreeing with me, of course. But but the question is whether human beings are something like a fixed concept, and then we've had it wrong up to now, and we're now slowly starting to figure out, oh, this is really how human beings work, and we now need to make technology really tick with that. Or whether it's actually the case that we change ourselves through technologies, right? We're not fixed. And so then it becomes more a matter of, like the vision that you just described, is that a fact of the matter, that it's just the case that people are like that, and we need to adapt our technologies to it, or is it more like a value that we have certain values that we wish to push, and we can actually design for that. We can just make it come true, and then the question is more, what do we want? Instead of what is the fact of the matter? Because I think if you see how human beings have been evolving together with technology, there's no fixed reference point or something. So my question is then, where do these values come from? That's a whole different. I really don't have. I have my values, but I don't have a strong idea on where to get them.
Do we have a shared set of values? Do we have a shared set of values, do you think?
I don't know. What are yours? Are they the same? No, I don't know.
What do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. I do believe we all have shared values. Being humans are like the most social beings on Earth. I think that is one of the strongest forces which drives our behavior. So if you look at all world religions or dogmas, it all comes together that be good to your neighbors, and the techniques we build around it. Yeah. So I think that's one of the most powerful forces.
Yeah. So I always tell my team, just don't focus all the time on technology. Just really look back where humanity is coming from, what kind of religions that we have in the past. Be open to all those religions because there's something in common that gives all those believers basically like a core value to believe in and to be stable and to push forward to it. And you can always disagree and have an argument about it, but you should be like all peaceful with each other. I think that's where humanity still fails and failed in the past, and we should learn from those practices. But then, to your point, how can we evolve as a human being and also develop those supernatures or superpowers? That's where I think having so much research in the medical field to really understand how the human body works, functions, and then applying technology to change our body. Right now it sounds crazy, but on Mars, for example, you have a way different gravity, 37% of Earth. So a human being couldn't live there as of now. But once we understand why specific humans build a second skeleton, or why other humans have glass bones. So when we figure out how we can manipulate our skeleton and then manipulate that by specific therapies or just injections, we can enable us to live on those planets without transforming those planets, which will take a little bit of time. Re-energize the core of Mars and everything. That we didn't figure that part out, but maybe once we figure out how we can change our body, we can also figure out how to change planets.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
So does that, what I'm hearing, I think, is that we roughly believe that technology is causing another human evolution? Is that what we're saying? That we're evolving because of the way we can or could interact with technology?
I would say so, yes. I think that our cultural evolution, and technology is part of that as well, really creates something that is real, and you can't really reduce that to our the neural networks in our brain, or let alone to genes or something like that. And it could even be the case that our brains and in the end, then in the second instance, our genes are sort of co-evolving with culture. There was a very interesting theory 20 years ago already about language as a sort of system. We're embedded in a system of language, social interaction with language, and that this is actually co-evolving with our brain networks. So it's not just first you have all these brains that can do language and then they start talking with each other. You get born into a linguistic environment already, right? So it's a sort of bidirectional evolution, yes.
I wanted to jump on that point that you'd mentioned earlier. You said, we have this idea maybe human beings are something like a fixed concept, but we're not fixed, and part of this idea is that the way we're using the technology, this technology and the human is sort of co-creative in some sense. So if I jumped on that idea with you and said, the work that you're doing, your dream project, how does that represent your sense of values about where you think we should be going when it comes to this interaction with humans and computers? Yeah, and I could say that for everyone here. I want to know about your dream projects and kind of how that represents these pieces we've been talking about.
Well, it's a very big question, of course, but if I were to focus on one particular issue, is that what I see in schools today is that kids learn gymnastics, and they learn arithmetic and reading and writing as completely different faculties and as completely different things. And even so, the reading and the writing is what really, and the arithmetic is what's really important. And then when they are completely tired of reading and writing, you go do some jumping in the gym, right? As if that's not really the core of it all. And I believe that for somebody to be sort of skilled and knowledgeable and to make sense of the world and to be in the world, you need to be exactly in the middle of that. You need to do what a skilled carpenter can do when he's like making just the right cut with his hands, not with a machine, but just this. I've seen this magnificent documentary where a Japanese woodworker was working on, well, and so on. So that kind of stuff, I don't see that in education today. So my vision would be to bring body and mind in that sense more together. But that's a value, right? It's not a necessary fact. I'm presenting it as a fact, of course. But I mean, you can change it. You can make Cartesian thinking machines of us. If you just put us in this kind of environment long enough, we'll become what Descartes said we were.
And maybe, Jody, you could follow up on that. We were talking earlier, about your dream project.
My dream project is to create an operating system for this new way of interacting with technology, one that is as easy to operate as thinking and moving our own bodies. And it can't be isolated to one or the other or limited in between. And it should use the way that the tools that we use to make sense of our world, whether that be our innate cognitive functions, whether that be our sensory intake. These things should make it should just talk to us in the way that we are ready into the world around us, so that we don't have to stop and think about pushing in the buttons in the right set. We are not adapting to technology. The evolution, I do not want to see the evolution. Okay, truth of the matter, I hate technology. I hate it. It makes me angry all the time. I am constantly screaming at my computers. And that's what bothers me. Like, I don't want to be mad when I use these things. I want to feel like I am Harry Potter. I want to feel like I am a Wonder Woman or a superhero. Like, that's how I want to feel. I want to have the Jedi mind trick and convince you all to do this right now. That's what I want. And I can't do that with this. And so, what I'm interested in is that kind of work, things that lead towards that. The more that we can build in perception and cognitive affordance and all of these things to make it as easy to operate as our own body and mind, but better, that's what I want.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
With scent.
With scent and heat.
I mean, that's why I'm so fascinated. That's why I'm so fascinated in what you're doing, because you're using that full sensory palette, and that's really interesting.
Yeah, it is.
What's your dream?
Yeah, so my dream is, which we already started working on, is taking back the social aspect. The thing is, now you have humans, you have technique, but now we're just yelling at the computer because we don't understand it. But that's also two ways, because they don't understand us. And it's still an external device. And what you see now is with biometrics and delivering biofeedback. Like with our Sensiks pod, we can already we can measure your heart rate, that way your emotions, your tension, and the technique can respond to that. So you don't have to yell, because it already feels your emotion way before you're even conscious of it. And so I know we're heading that way. And if we put more of a social interactive aspect to it, I think the techniques becomes good for all of us.
Clemens.
Thanks. Dream project. So before I go there, I'm the opposite of Jody. I love technology. I'm an early adopter. So whenever there's something new coming out, I'm trying to get my hands on it. That's why we are pushing also from. I don't want to sell the Vectorform approach, but that's why I love that entire mantra. There's something coming up. We work with the OEMs. We push that a little bit, not just a little bit, but we try to push it as much as possible. And I just love technology. I like to combine things and try to figure out how can we use it in a more effective way. And that brings me then to my dream project. I mean, I love life. I love being active and everything. I want to live forever. And there are things on Earth that live for thousands of years. They're swimming in the ocean. So when we crack when we crack human life, or life on Earth, then we can apply that knowledge and fuse that into technology to help us to live forever. I mean, even just copying our brain, as stupid as it sounds, and there's so many movies out there. Transcendence, Johnny Depp. Just watch it. It's a fun movie. But once we can do that, we can shoot ourselves to anywhere in space because we can travel faster than light, and we don't get killed because it's just energy. It's just light or something different, and we can reshape in whatever way we want, and we just keep everything as we feel, as we are, or we still would feel like we as a human because it's all in here. It's not in my arm. I can replace my arm. I can replace my leg. I can replace my kidney, my heart, and I would still feel alive. So if, or as soon as we can transplant our brains, we can live forever and we can expand our life for infinity. But question is then also, what do you do? Do you want to live forever? It's like those endless questions, endless answers, but that's where we can turn from like technology to the meaning of life.
I'd love to bring this back to this side of the ring, because everyone's like, okay, what's Jelle going to say about this one? because in some way, I mean, you know, you're talking about something that is really, I think, very popular and very powerful in the culture of technology, and I think the wider culture right now, which is this kind of dream of eternal life through technology, this dream of digitizing our entire minds and then becoming sort of uploaded to the heaven of the clouds, where we live forever and can go into new bodies. But
let's first make a vacuum cleaner robot that really works. Okay. All right. Well, so yeah, I just said that we can create our own beings, right? And that there's no fixed. I think there's some kind of boundaries. So
Yeah.
I don't believe in this. I don't believe you could because it hinges on a metaphor of ourselves being essentially virtual. So already, if you believe that the core of human being is essentially a software that's running on your brain, then in principle, it's a matter of finding out how the code works, and then it's copy-paste, right? But I don't think that we're code. I think that's not what we are. So I think we're actually ourselves in the flesh. And that's not so easily copied, right? So that would be mine.
Isn't it? Yeah, you've got your own over there.
Here.
So that's I think like VR and AR is so impactful, especially VR. We talked about last night. So there are studies that human beings are known that they have two hands, but there are studies when you just introduce another body part, another limb, they actually can adapt pretty fast. I mean, also when you believe in evolution and not just creation, once you believe in evolution that you can evolve to whatever next stage, then I think it's a copy and paste mechanism. So you copy your current phase, or you copy your current state, and you can infuse that into any other different form. You can leave the other one, keep growing, but you have like basically backups. And I love that fact that you can expand in so many different areas and levels.
I hear something that, so I know exactly what you're talking about with that Stanford study, right? Like they added the third arm. If you don't know this study, it's this one from Stanford's virtual lab. And what they did was you first start working with one hand, and then you start working with two hands, and then they give you a third arm. And at first you're all like, why do I have this third arm? But then you really quickly adapt to it, and it just becomes part of your body. But what I think is interesting is that we're talking about what's essential to evolution to both of you. So, right, like, because what you're describing, if I'm just a beam of light flying through space, right, I probably am going to evolve beyond how I use my current mind. Because if our current state, our mind is part of our full body. It's not disembodied, right? It's part of that. And so in order, it seems like there's an evolutionary step between what you're suggesting and what you're suggesting is the main crux of the question here. So I wonder how having these kind of faux appendages, like you're describing, but also this very current state of embodied cognition, how we think those would, I think that would do an evolution to the brain in itself. What do you think about that? I
don't know. Yeah, I'm sort of skeptical, I think, about the possibility of really going beyond our own bodies. But it doesn't mean to say that we're not already going beyond our bodies in the sense of sort of extending, right? So if you have a surgeon operating in an operating theater 1,000 kilometers away, I believe that in his experience, or her experience, that person is really over there and not in their own body. But if you would then sort of cut off the body, and I think the whole system would shut down. So there needs to be like this core origin that is always in the end some kind of a living system that is trying to keep itself alive. And of course, there's all these. I mean, the story is quite old, right? You have Daniel Dennett, is a famous cognitive scientist, philosopher, who he wrote the book Consciousness Explained. If you read it, it's not explained yet, but it's still a good book. But he has this famous experiment idea that your brain is being copied one-on-one, and then they also made a backup copy. But then there's a button. If you press the button, if your body presses the button, you switch from one consciousness to the other. And there's a nice cult movie from the 1980s where this one consciousness is constantly thinking, what will happen if I push the button? Shall I do it? Shall I do it? And then he presses the button, and then this kind of smile of the other guy popping up saying, I'm not going to press the button again to switch back. But I don't think that, this is still science fiction to me.
Yeah. Still fiction, but there are already movements in that way, because probably you know it with two monkeys, one in America, one in Japan, and that they just they connected the motor cortex, which is for movement of the brain, and they connected it to through the internet all the way from America to Japan to a monkey in Japan, and the monkey in America, or the other way around, could move the arm of the other one. So
proves my point.
I think it's about what's your definition of your consciousness or your body, or where does it end? If you can just like a matrix.
Well, maybe it's like maybe the metaphor. If I have a rose in my garden, a rose bush thing, and it has a stem, and they use a different plant for the stem than for the flowers, right? I don't know, better roots for the one and better flowers for the other, and they grow one on top of the other. You can't just cut it off and then let it grow further, right? You need the core as well, but the flowers are not in the root, right? So it's different systems. It's sort of an extended rose, not extended mind, but extended rose. But it's sort of in the end connected. And even these monkeys, you can't just take away one monkey and then the other will just keep on going as the other or something like that. You can extend pretty much to infinity, but it's always traced back to some kind of source, which is a life form of some sort. And I don't think you can just remake that and copy that.
Do you think that's more like a soul? So like
No, it's absolutely, it's not religious, it's just physics, but it's, so in that sense, in principle, you could make it, but then you'd have to make a complete living being. And I think that's simply not something, so it's not just information, that's my point. You need the whole living system.
So my colleague had Lipson. He is a professor at Columbia University in New York, and he is a roboticist. And he created, and he does AI. And he created this, in their lab, they created this robot that they gave 4 legs to. It's a square with 4 legs on it. But they didn't tell the robot what it was. They just set it loose, let it learn itself what how the robot functioned, what the structure of the robot was. And at first, it had really crazy ideas of what it was shaped like. It thought maybe it was a rectangle. It thought maybe it was a triangle. Finally, it figures out that it has 4 legs and this square box body. And it starts to teach itself to walk. So it tries all these crazy ways of walking, and finally it figures out how to walk. And then they come in and they chop a leg off, which sounds really horrible. And it looks really sad to this robot, because at first it doesn't understand what's happened to itself. It's flailing around because it still has this conception of itself as this one-shaped robot. And I was just talking out in the hallway with Randy. Where's Randy? Hi, Randy. We were talking about people with phantom limb syndrome, so people that lose their limbs. And he was telling me that people notice it more when they're standing than when they're sitting, and that it takes a while for the body to remember that this isn't here and lose that pain of it. And I'm wondering if maybe what we're talking about is that there has to be some self-image, that some sort of self-understanding of how your system works that you use to operate your full mind, whether it be a beam of light, whether it be your actual corporal body or whatever, that the way that our mind works is based on what we conceive as the operating system for it, or the embodiment of it, maybe?
Yeah, muscle memory, like growing up, like having that and really planned in the back of your head, brain, whatever. So you cannot just like cut it off and move on without like reflecting and really learning from those experiences and accepting. So I think like all those stages are crucial for human growth, or like for any life creature on Earth to adapt. Because if you can't adapt, you die. So that's what evolution teaches us. And I think that's why I love those conversations. I would have loved to be in the room with Christopher Columbus, trying to convince the guys it's not a flat Earth. No, we are round-shaped, and we can actually travel around the other way. And yeah, he found America. And looking back, we laugh about it. So I would love to be still alive in 500 years and see how everything that we discussed here is either way.
Native Americans
Ray
say
Kurzweil
we always
gets his
knew it
way.
was
We're going to
here,
be
right?
alive in 500 years.
We'll see. Yeah.
So just as a way to maybe close some of this up, I liked how some of the different philosophies were revealed here, some of the different directions all this could be going. One last question I'd like to kind of round through all of you would be, what is the step you're working on now, the sort of the thing you're working on that represents your value, your vision for where this is going, and what kind of people do you hope follow you? Like.
Good question.
Okay, well, I'm very chatty, so I'll go ahead. The way that I've been going about this is to infect my thinking in multiple directions, right? So first I started working on sensors to make it possible to track human movement, human thought. Then I started working on robotics to try to make it so that I could talk to, so I started with Big Dog, right? Big Dog from Boston Dynamics and DARPA. I wanted it to respond to me like a dog does. Like I just wanted to talk to it that way. And then I went to Microsoft and I worked on HoloLens. I mean, we need that part, right? And then I started working on AI because I really need that part if it's going to do what I need it to do. And now I work at Singularity University and I go around the world working on seeding little projects here and there and cheering people on as they go, hoping that, and by speaking, hoping that a lot of people can hear and have at least respond to it. Even if they don't do it, at least they have to, they're then choosing not to.
Oh, we got a fire up in the light up there. That's not good. There's hey, the fire died out. There's a scary moment there.
Thank your lighting guys for that. Thank you.
Did you just mention
for helping
Singularity,
us.
by the way?
Mm-hmm.
Is that?
I did
God's watching
mention.
us.
I did mention Singularity.
Johnny Depp is in the room.
Oh God.
The machines
Okay,
are
yeah,
watching
so
us.
tell us about your project.
Aren't we all like collectively tensed in these days about these kinds of things, like
Yeah.
something happening in a big audience?
Yeah.
All right, so it's just a lamp burning. So what I'm working on is, I'm very focused right now on working with people with autism, and the reason I find that a fascinating condition, also because lots of the people I work with are very emancipated and strong in voicing their own perspective on things and explaining to us that we don't understand anything about what it's like to be a person with autism, and that we shouldn't try to make people with autism be more like us, but instead we should try to interface in some way so that both, like what they call us neurotypicals, which is very interesting. It's kind of a sort of a name as if we also have a disorder, which is, I mean, it's just true. It's just a matter of perspective, right? And the interesting thing is, what I'm trying to, I think that technology could help, for instance, building a sort of a social interface between very diverse group of people. And for me, autism is only one first example. It's the most radical example in some sense when you're talking about social interaction. And I'm interested in trying to find out how can we interface between these diversities without asking one group to conform or adapt to the other, up to the point that they can no longer be themselves anymore, right? So how can everybody be themselves, but we can still connect to each other? That would be my, what I'm working on.
That sounds like an awesome project. I mean, that's one of the things I would love to experience. What would it be like to experience true communication across neural diversity? That's amazing.
I'm sorry, I got really scared, so I cut myself off.
Did you just give yourself an extra turn?
Yes. So
So, what were you saying about superhumans?
yeah, so these superhumans, they need superheroes to learn from. So I work with a lot of people that are not traditionally invited to the table. I like to work with people from people that aren't involved really in the boardrooms making OEM decisions. So I work with people in developing world. I work with people with special abilities rather than disabilities, because they are very articulate about how they see the world in a way that we can't possibly be. So anyways, I swear I'm done.
Well, I think most of you, I hope most of you have experienced what I'm working on now. If you enter the Expo, the first big black box on the left is our sensory reality cabin. Who has used that today or yesterday? I'm going right now. Cool, nice. Why I'm working there? Myself, I studied psychology, and during my study I also got diabetes. So that's when I got more interested in health, but also I noticed how dependent I am on technology, because right now I can measure my blood sugar in like 5 seconds, which is really great for my quality of life. So after doing my master's in health behavior, I got connected with VR, and in the end with sensory reality. So what we're also doing with the sensory reality cabin is to improve quality of life for the mental healthcare, also for the regular healthcare. For example, you talked about autism. You could use it as an empathy cabin to experience how other people with distorted senses experience their environment. You can use it for people with anorexia or neglect or all kinds of cognitive disorders. Right now we're also using it for people with cognitive disorders who are mentally different than us, just to bring them relaxation. And we can also use it to confront people with their fears, with their trauma, like war veterans. You can really build. I always watched Star Trek as a kid. You could compare it to the holodeck. No, it's finally here. I think these are great technologies which we can and we must use for the good. So that's what I'm working on.
Cool.
How much time do we have? I'll be fast. As I mentioned, I love technology, so I really want to push how the smart home works, because to the point, like, once we understand how the human being is functioning in the space, how we can manipulate space without like touching a screen or like throwing commands in the room, so that the entire space conforms to us, so that all those tools come aware and serve us the best way possible. That's what I'm working on, translating that to manufacturers, because when we're in different planets, they also need to know, hey, we have those life conditions, we need to 3D print XYZ in this way to enable our tasks, enable our lives. So that's the one part, but the other part, so that's the technology part. But to the point of like human beings, like understanding life in all those kinds of forms. I'm really interested, and I'm working with my director of HR, to really understand how do we tick, what drives us, what kind of methods can we put in place to getting to know each other way better, to collaborate better, to grow together better. So really going deep into how we function and tick as human beings, because I want to ultimately combine those two to create, again, like as Lisa said in the beginning, I want to seriously expand life beyond Earth. So that's my biggest dream, and I'll summarize all those discoveries and findings, put it together to a book that I want to present to one specific person, because that one specific person did not consider the human aspect when the travel to Mars begins. It's all about technology, and the paragraph about the human experience is just 4 or 5 lines. So I want to present that, how to enable, how do we get humans beyond Earth.
Awesome. I just wanted to thank everybody who's on this stage for coming out, for sharing your passion, for sharing your work, for sharing the diversity of opinion that you have. And I'm excited about what you're designing. I'm excited to see the future that you're helping us evolve into. And I just want to give a big round of applause to all of our panelists. Thank you very much.